In this video, we're going to continue where we left off from the previous video and look at interacting with the JavaScript DOM. And this time, instead of just manipulating content on the web page, we're going to tie those changes to events. So for example, when someone clicks on a button, we change the style of a certain element. Now remember, most scripting languages have the same core fundamentals: output, variables, control structures, loops, and functions. However, this is a little bit of a detour from those concepts, and this is unique to JavaScript because it runs in the browser on the client side. So JavaScript has to do things like react to user events, like manipulate the web page content, where languages like Python, Node.js, and PHP, which are running on the server, do not have to deal with. So let's do a quick example. Let's create a new file called events.html. Let's fill it with our standard HTML tags. And we're just going to do a series of mouse events. And we'll throw in here a title. All right, next let's just throw in a sample paragraph and a link, just so we have a couple elements that we can work with. And finally, we'll add a button. So if I save that and open it up, we have a basic web page with a couple elements, a link, and a button. So let's first start by having the button react to a click. And for now, let's just have the click trigger a console.log so we can confirm that our click event is working. So I'm going to open up my script tag. And first thing we want to do is we want to create a reference to any elements that we are going to work with. Both elements we want to have events listened for and elements that we want to change. So I'm just going to zip through our document here and add an ID to these four elements. All right, so I'm going to start by creating a variable called button, and in my document I'm going to get element by ID using my button ID. And now if I want to react to the button click event, I then take my button variable, I add an event listener. And when you add an event listener, you have to specify which event you are listening for. So there is a long list of events that you can listen for, things like click, double click, mouse over, mouse out, submit, page load, and the list goes on. So in this example, I want to listen for a click. The second thing we need to specify is what happens when a click happens. So to give instructions on what happens, I just insert a function directly into this add event listener method. And for now, let's just console.log button was clicked. And now if I save that, open up my developer tools so I can watch my console and refresh. And now when I click my button, we get the message in my console. So let's replace that console.log with changing an element in our web page. So let's change our heading. So I'm going to create a variable called heading and set it equal to in our document. I'm going to get element by ID, and this time we're going to get our heading. And then we're going to take our heading and change its color. And if I save that and refresh, when I click, we now change the color of our heading. If we go to our elements, we can see that our heading now has an inline style of color equals red. Now, up until this point, anytime I reference an element in our web page, I create a variable to store that reference. However, we don't need to. I'm just going to show you an alternate syntax here. I could say document dot get element by ID, and let's fetch this time our paragraph. Then I'm going to add an event listener, and let's listen for a mouse over. And when a mouse over occurs, and I'll just shrink my font size here 1 so we can see that whole line. When a mouse event occurs, again, let's look at our document and get an element by the ID. And we'll change the display style property to none. So basically, when a mouse over my paragraph, we're going to take that paragraph and remove it. So notice I have not used any variables this time. I am just fetching the element and then adding the event listener all in one line. So if I save that and refresh, when I mouse over my paragraph, it disappears. So this is the kind of code you would use when creating a series of tabs. When one tab is clicked, you would use the display property to display the appropriate content and hide the non-appropriate content. Also, another potential syntax is I can add events using inline JavaScript. So let's take the heading here, and let's say when I mouse over this heading, I want to change this to a new color. So I can say document dot get element by ID, and in this case we're fetching itself. And I should use single quotes there as to not confuse my JavaScript quotes with my HTML quotes. And I want to change the style of color to blue. And I'll just bump this down a line here. Right, so this time my event is right here on mouse over. I'm going to fetch the heading, which is itself. Now there are other ways to do this, but we'll get to that in another video. And we'll change the style, the color property, to blue. So if I save and refresh, and now when I mouse over my title, it changes blue, and I can change it red, and then back to blue. So as with any language or any concept, there usually is a variety of methods to achieve the same here. And none of these are specifically better than the other. It really just depends on the situation. However, at this point, when you're learning to code, I would say the primary goal here is to get it working and not necessarily to do it properly. Properly will come with time.